It's great to be here. Before I start, let me just ask one question of the audience. You all have your paddles. I'd like you to look back for the company that you're in today, 10 years ago to today. And do you think the company that you're with has experienced more pressure today relative to 10 years ago? How many think more pressure? Good number of you.
Great paddle. Fantastic.
We did some research that I think supports the notion of mounting pressure, and it's what I call the dark side of technology. It's totally countercultural to Silicon Valley. There's a script in Silicon Valley. You start out by talking about all these awesome technologies and all the great opportunity that's going to be created, the things you can do with it. I want to focus on the dark side of all this technology, which is mounting performance pressure. On a systematic basis across the world, these digital technology infrastructures that we're deploying are systematically reducing barriers to entry and barriers to movement on a global scale. That pressure, the pressure that's resulting from this, we captured in an analysis. We asked, how are companies doing? And we focused on US companies, but we took a long period of time. We went back to 1965 and looked at all public companies, not a sample, but every single public company in the US since 1965 to today. And we looked at our measure of performance as return on assets. Now, it's not a perfect measure, but we think it's good enough as a good indicator of performance. Since 1965 to today, for all US public companies, return on assets has basically collapsed. It's declined by 75% over that time period. It's been a long, sustained erosion. There's absolutely no sign of it leveling off, and certainly no signs of it turning around. So if we want an indication of mounting performance pressure, I think that's a good indicator. In that context, I think all of us as executives are very good at identifying the risks associated with a business initiative. What are all the things that could go wrong? And we're very good at framing those risks. I want to put on the table that the biggest risk of all is not doing anything. Because in a world of mounting performance pressure, if that's what you do, you're going to be dead. By the way, in addition to the erosion and return on assets, we also looked at topple rates, the rate at which leaders, in terms of performance, drop out of those leadership positions. Topple rates have more than doubled over this time period. So again, significant erosion in performance. And I think in that context, the focus of this session is on technology as an enabler of innovation. I would say technology is also making innovation an imperative. You know, I thought I would never see the day where I would be more radical than Astro. Astro this morning said he understood that there was a part of the organization that needed to keep the trains running on time. I would argue that if all you're doing is keeping the trains running on time, you're dead. If you're not finding ways to make the trains run faster, cheaper, and deliver more value to the passengers throughout your business, not just over here where you have all these interesting kinds of innovation initiatives, but throughout the organization, you're going to be dead in a world of mounting pressure. So it makes innovation really important. Let me ask one other question. If you think about your company today, how many of you would characterize your company as highly innovative, as a company that systematically throughout the company and on a sustained basis is delivering innovation? Not too many. And I think that there's a reason for that. I think one of the issues that we face as we get scale in companies is we actually see a diminishing amount of innovation. And I don't think it's by accident. I don't think it's by coincidence. We have built all the companies we know and love today around a model that's actually quite simple. It's a scalable efficiency model. It's based on the notion of as you get more and more scale, you become more and more efficient. What do you need for scalable efficiency? Well, one thing, you need predictability. You need to have forecasts and predictions that are accurate. Second thing you need as a result of that is you need to standardize work activity throughout the company and tightly specify that work activity so it can be predictable, so that there are no deviations from course. And wherever possible, if you want predictability, take people out of the equation. Automate. Turn it over to computers. Computers are much more predictable than people. But the problem is, too, that a lot of the technology we've used for that over the past several decades has been very hardwired technology. You put it in, and man, you are on a certain path, and you can't deviate from that path. So in that world of scalable efficiency, I ask you, how much opportunity is there for innovation and learning? But scalable efficiency has created enormous wealth. It's created great scale. It's hard to argue with success. But on the other hand, that success, if you look at the return on assets analysis we've been doing, is coming to an end. And the very model of scalable efficiency that drove such great companies is increasingly becoming a barrier to the kind of innovation that we all need in order to survive in a world of mounting performance pressure. So I think one of the questions on the table is, how do we address this? What are the ways to break out of this very tightly integrated, tightly specified model we have? I'm going to suggest that one approach is to expand our view of what innovation is. I would say that in my conversations with executives, certainly in the US and Western Europe, if we talk about innovation, the conversation very quickly narrows down to technology innovation, product innovation, maybe if we're really sophisticated, process innovation, business model innovation. I want to suggest that there's an even higher level of innovation that we all need to put on the radar and actively address. And it's what I call institutional innovation. It's going back to the very essence, the question of why do we come together in companies anyway, to begin with? Well, a guy by the name of Ronald Coase wrote an essay in 1937 where he answered that question, and he won the Nobel Economics Prize for that essay. And his answer was basically scalable efficiency. We come together in large companies because it's easier and more cost-effective to coordinate activity across a very large number of participants within a company than it is across independent companies. Our belief is that given the impact of these digital technology infrastructures, that rationale is becoming less and less compelling. It is actually really easy to scale activity across many different participants on a global scale in ways that weren't feasible in the past. So if that's the case, the question becomes, why do we have companies going forward? Why do they exist? Now, there are some who believe that large companies are a relic of the past. They're all going to disappear. We're going to become free agents, and we're going to freely associate when need be to get things done. I don't take that point of view. I believe we still need large institutions, but I think the reason for having large institutions is going to be fundamentally different. And it has to do with the notion of fostering scalable learning. The reason we're going to come together in companies in the future is because we'll learn faster as part of that company than we ever could on our own or as part of any other company. Now, that's a fundamentally different rationale, and I actually believe in conflict with scalable efficiency. Again, if you demand predictability, standardization, tight specification of activities, where's the opportunity to learn in all of that, other than shunting people out to the ghetto of training programs and then pulling them back into their tightly specified activities? So it's a fundamentally different proposition. And one reaction is to get overwhelmed by it, to say, wow, You're talking about transforming my whole company, the rationale for why we're here, all the activities, all the policies and practices we have are going to have to change. Yeah, over time they will. But I want to suggest there are opportunities to move to edges of your company and to start to build the practices and arrangements and relationships that are required for scalable learning. Just to give you a quick example, a company that all of you are familiar with, SAP. SAP was founded by a guy, a good friend of mine, Hasso Plattner. And as SAP grew bigger and scaled, he became more and more concerned about the fact that SAP was becoming bureaucratic inside, that it had a not invented here culture, and that everybody was too conservative about what they were doing. So he brought in a guy by the name of Shai Agassi, made him a senior executive of the company, put him in charge of an edge of his business. He said, if you're over there on this edge, they're not going to pay a lot of attention to you because there's not a lot of revenue and no profits being generated from that edge. You can do things that wouldn't be possible in the core of the business. And what Shai did was create, starting with a very simple online platform where he reached out to third-party application developers. Nobody within SAP, he was reaching out to the third parties who were developing software on top of SAP. And he created the SAP Community Network. And in the early stages, the only thing that this community network was about was if you as an application developer were running into problems in writing a code, post your problem. See if anybody has an answer. Turns out over time, this became hugely effective. It's now got over 2 million participants on a global scale. The average time to answering a question is roughly 17 minutes to getting an answer from somebody else in the network. And it's shrinking as the network expands. We're creating an opportunity for scalable learning on this platform. A whole set of other innovations around reputation profiles and then creating collaboration spaces. Now, a lot of this network is about application developers coming together based on relationships that they've built in this community to start entirely new application development efforts and learning by working together to develop new applications. A very different model in terms of scalable learning. And by the way, all those SAP developers who were saying there's nobody out there who can be really helpful to us, word spread that your productivity went way up if you went out to this community. And now they're all active participants in the community, and it's fundamentally changed the culture and orientation of a lot of the organization within SAP. So I think there's an opportunity here to think about scalable learning. And in this context, I think all of you as IT executives and CIOs, you are fundamentally in the center of a lot of the opportunity to redesign work environments so that you can create scalable learning opportunities, because new generations of technology are going to be critical to achieving this. And by the way, in this context, if you're truly serious about scalable learning, one of the key favorite quotes of mine is by Bill Joy, who said, founder of Sun Microsystems, said, no matter how many smart people you have in your organization, just remember one thing. There are a lot more smart people outside your organization than inside. And if you're really serious about scalable learning, you're not going to accelerate the learning as fast if you can't connect and don't connect with others outside the organization so you can learn faster. So an interesting principle to follow. Now, in this context, I want to briefly talk about cloud computing, because it's one of the new generations of technology that we think is going to be central to achieving restructuring the economics of innovation. And it does it on multiple levels. There's one level, and I think most people still today, when they talk about cloud computing, are focused on it as a way to cut costs. It's just a cheaper way to outsource your IT than before. Good. Great job. Our belief is it is going to restructure the economics of innovation much more broadly in the enterprise. And the starting point is restructuring the economics of coming up with new products and services, particularly if you've got compute-intensive R&D efforts. Cloud computing can be central to this. The pharma companies are rapidly moving into cloud computing. Eli Lilly, in one example that was cited, took a process, a compute process that would have taken them 12 weeks to execute with their internal IT platforms, and they collapsed it down to 20 minutes. And the total cost of that compute effort was $6.20 using cloud computing. It's a dramatic reduction. More broadly, analysts have estimated that throughout the pharma industry, the impact of cloud computing is to reduce the total development cost of a new drug by $400 million, and to accelerate the entry of that product by over 30%. So starting with the acceleration of new product development, because you can do parallel processing as one of the key issues, parallel development efforts in ways that just aren't possible internally. Secondly, opportunities to restructure the economics of scaling. Once you come up with an interesting new product and service and get it into the marketplace, how do you scale that more rapidly to accelerate adoption and usage of that product and service? And here, the whole use of cloud computing to support broader ecosystems, much more diverse ecosystems. And we're starting to see very different architectures, IT architectures emerge to make this possible. So you're not just aggregating lots of third parties, but you're actually coordinating very complex multi-stage activities on these cloud computing platforms. Another significant opportunity. And then ultimately an opportunity around restructuring the economics of your customer relationships by using cloud computing. The opportunity to take those relationships that today are relatively narrow slivers. We understand a little bit of our customer based on the products that we sell to them. How can we use cloud computing as a way to broaden that relationship and get a deeper understanding of who those customers are individually, not just as a segment or as a mass market, but individually, and become more and more helpful to them in terms of suggesting things to them that they weren't even aware of, but turn out to be hugely valuable to them. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to think about cloud computing as a very different way to restructure the economics of innovation. New product development, scaling products and services once they get into market, and redefining the relationships with those customers over time. So cloud computing is just one of the technologies that's on the horizon here that potentially has this kind of opportunity available to it. I haven't talked about, it's certainly been covered in other discussions, but the whole notion of mobile computing, social software, big data, all of that coming together to create opportunities for scalable learning and much more powerful innovation initiatives than have ever been possible before. That's the real opportunity. And again, as I look out at this group, who's better positioned to help move your companies into harnessing these new generations of technology to drive entirely new forms of innovation and ultimately the scalable learning? Cloud computing is just one of the technologies available.